All right, module 3. Today I figured let's start with some runic letters. This simply says welcome or welcome in Old Germanic language, and of course the runic alphabet, the Elder Futhark. Why did I do that? Well, because today I would like to be a little more philosophical. We embarked on a lot of neuroscientific, neuropsychological discussions last week. We talked about action potential, we talked about brain structure, and we will continue today as well. And in fact, I will attach another video lecture that goes deeper into the limbic system and stress response and the pituitary gland, neurotransmitter, etc. But I would like to take a little break from this discussion, not because the discussion is not relevant to the topic of this week, but because the hard science and more philosophical perspective should really become one in this lecture. So perhaps a little less things to remember and more things to experience, to relate to. So first thing first, let's just review what the main goal of this course is: the understanding of consciousness from a psychological perspective, psychology of consciousness, to understand what makes us human, what makes us who we are, and how to better relate to one another. All right, so examining, controlling, and verifying. We're back to the core, the exact science of the hard matter, or the hard science of the scientific matter, so to speak. What does it mean? We go back to the discussion from last week. So examining, controlling, and verifying. There is something to be said about the distinction and the connection. The textbook says this question has been posed under the assumption according to which those two fields are very separate, both in terms of history and epistemological essence, especially in regard to methodologies and goals, and B, philosophy, especially in the context, that is, theoretical framework or mindset, of analytic philosophy, which sees itself as a support of science, particularly hard science, to shed light or clarify assumptions, ideas, and thoughts, often relying on formal logic and cognitive structure used in natural science. Now let's continue. Donald Verran thoroughly analyzed the work by Hegel. Hegel, of course, the German philosopher Gottfried Friedrich Hegel, especially in regard to the possibility of understanding consciousness. As we have seen, according to this interpretation of the German philosopher, the two moments of Ansicht are brought together by the work of consciousness. However, this is a constant battle because of the very nature of Ansicht, which contains the very essential of the epiphenomenon. Given that we are talking about phenomenology of the spirit, the Ansicht is therefore a positive object or event in existence with the absence of sense or perception, coded in sense, perception, and understanding, representing the three failed attempts to bridge the gap between these opposites, which cannot be apprehended as a function of the object, but they lead to self-certain truth. Of course, this search for the truth is dialectical even beyond the Hegelian conception, and somewhat akin to the usage of the term in dialectic behavioral therapy, or in sociopolitical discourse aimed at mitigating or at least making sense of two opposites. This might be just a summary for some of you, but if you think about Hegelian dialectic, according to the model by Gottfried Friedrich Hegel, you have thesis on one side, which in our case will be the scientific premise, antithesis on the opposite side, and of course the synthesis between these two. Now there's a plenty of philosophical debate about whether this synthesis is cumulative. Now, to conclude this first portion of the introduction to chapter 2, the exact science of the hard matter, let's think about this concept of going back and forth, right? So this swinging between poles, between opposites. We could think of the mind-brain problem at the center of critical neuroscience. More specifically, we are thinking of epistemological efforts to justify biologically, for instance, the natural emergence in evolutionary economic terms of human morality, or, on the opposite view, to claim that human morality is in itself enough proof of the existence of a divine maker. We can think of swinging on an exercise ball platform to increase the core mass of the abdomen as a metaphor for trying to balance the absurd or conflicting views, for instance, science versus religion, or the absence of any values or universal principles. From this metaphor, the opposite is someone who melts on a rigid but stable platform, i.e. people who blindly follow dogmas to make themselves feel at ease. In any case, we would need to define the parameters of an illusion or self-delusion of existence. This act of redefining or relearning the deep meaning of morality, in the example above, we could be faced with a toward self-centered movement, emerges intuition, self-consciousness of self, which in the Hegelian analysis represent the primary path to a truth which is A, absolute, and B, beyond illusion. Beyond illusion as in interpreted under the framework of jenseits. So German for this side of the equation, this side of the immanent as opposed to transcendental equation. Okay, so not the opposite of afterlife. This path leads to the true meinen, or meaning, right, in a Hegelian sense, which allows this emergence truth to emerge from both consciousness as sleep and sleep of consciousness through the Unglücklichkeit of skeptical Stoic perspective. This is the linguistic and meaning-making, meaning-originating phase before the reabsorption of the self-affirming consciousness-based reality into the verkehrte Welt. Now, this is very, very deep. Not because the book states it as it is, but it's profound as it's complex, and it's really hard to distinguish all these parameters unless someone that is very, very interested in Hegelian philosophy has also a profound knowledge how to utilize this term appropriately. This is connected to the discussion on truth from last week, to what it means to observe, and of course it's connected to the scientific method. So one thing that perhaps we should discuss a little more in depth is the pyramid of scientific evidence. That's what I would like to start with today. So I will add, as usual, a few slides, a few descriptions here. So I'll do that and perhaps add, little descriptions and add, vocal overlay to make sure that I don't miss anything, because there's a lot to discuss today. But I also would like to integrate science with spirituality, philosophy, religion, anthropology, sociology, ethnology, culture, etc. today. So let's assume this, that we can start with a pyramid of evidence, okay? So that's a usual. We draw a pyramid, a little triangle here, okay? And here we are already establishing what? A hierarchy, okay? A hierarchy that will determine how we view the world, how we interpret the world, what kind of meaning and what kind of value we associate to the world, okay? A hierarchy. Now, the hierarchy as a concept is connected to hieros, to the Greek term for the top, the ancient, the wise, the elder, the person that, or the thing, the symbol, the archetype that dominates. Now, careful here, because when we think about domination, all right, or dominance, okay, to dominate, all right, dominate, this is already something that we really, really need to pay attention to. The first reaction that unfortunately I see, I experience, I hear from a lot of people is a reaction of, mildly put, uneasiness, but in general, much more strongly, a reaction of distaste, of offense, of unsafety, of hatred, okay? Domination, hierarchy usually carry a lot of weight, and negative weight, that is. And it's really unfortunate. Let's analyze these two terms to see, first of all, whether hierarchy and domination or dominance are justified, and whether they're predicated on something that is unethical or something that is extremist or something akin to supremacy. So in the first case, we already mentioned that you can also do some work on your own. Hieros, okay? Hieros as a Greek term, okay? And hierophany, it's one of the other terms that really encourage you to analyze also on your own. And the government, the control, and then arche, of course, arche, like the ancient part, you know, the antiquity outside of time and space. You will hear me saying this a lot. Something's not good because it's either old or new, but something is good because it's true, okay? And so the assumption here is that there's an archetypical, archaic even knowledge that determines governance, hierarchy, okay? In this case, the term dominance is really connected to dominus, okay? Dominus, in Latin, dominus, which, for lack of a better term, is really God, okay? And I will spell it out. I hope I'm not offending anyone here by spelling out the English term God or other real languages. I will do my best not to utilize Hebrew or Aramaic letters to be respectful, but the term dominus is again connected to a variety of things that represent a divine being. So dominus and deus are not quite the same thing, and yet they are connected. So from dominus to deus, okay? And let me start with the first one. So deus, or the extension with the scripture deus pater, okay? Deus pater, okay? It's really the Indo-European root. Now I spell it out with Latin letters, but you can find the European root of that as the Godfather, the God figure, okay? This is found in Sanskrit, and therefore the whole Hindu subculture in the big Indo-European culture, not subculture because it's less relevant, but quite the contrary. Of course, you know, Lithuanian and Latvian as one of the most primeval European languages, all the ways to modern Italic languages, a variation of that, Deus, Dio, Dios, etc., also toward Greek Zeus, okay, or the runic Tibets, okay, the runic Tibets. It's also related to that. Now, whether you use the elder Futhark or more Futhark, it's irrelevant, but it's the term for God, the divine figure, the supreme figure in the hierarchy, the one on top, okay? The term pater, of course, is found throughout the ancient world as well, and the usual work that I do, if you remember my conversation on the Lautverschiebung, on the Grimms, is that you can just substitute some letters and you'll have it. So let's start with the consonant, okay? And then we'll add the vowels. Now, if you know something about linguistics, you know that the vowels are, I wouldn't say they're not as relevant as the consonants, but they're less expressed outwardly. So that's the difference between an alphabet, alpha, beta, alphabet, right? Okay. The alphabet is a term that derives from our alpha and beta, or A and B, right? Alphabet, as opposed to an abjad, for instance. If you think about Arabic or Hebrew or Aramaic, they don't contain vowels, and the vowels, or rather, they do contain vowels, but in terms of diacritic signs and symbols and points and dots and curves to give the pronunciation, the vibration of the vowel, right? So from pater, Latin, pater, okay? If I may, I'll go to archaic English here, pater, and of course from PH, okay, from PH, you have pater, okay, and then The second one, of course, is the TH here that gives rise to our current father, right? So same language, okay? And you can do this with all other European languages, of course. And the same thing, you know, for mother, okay? The term mother is even easier to speak because it's less consonantic, so the M stays put, okay? There's a variety of phonetic reason for that. And the A, I would say, around at this level, okay, around this level, okay, turns into a O. So mother, okay? Now, so this simply means that we are together, okay? We're all together in this. We all came from the same core. Now, again, this is not the claim I'm making, that just because something sounds similar must be similar. This is a very common logical fallacy in historical linguistics. So you have to be very, very careful whether two things are similar either in spelling or in due to phonetic reasons or sociocultural structure or syntax. They could be phonetically similar or syntactically or grammatically similar due to pure chance. And the example I mentioned is evil has nothing to do with the devil, etymologically speaking. But nevertheless, there are things that are clear indication of commonality of development, if nothing less. And not surprising, those terms have to do with family, with agriculture, with the house, something close to us. So why Deus Pater, not Deus Mater? Someone would argue. Why it has to be a father figure and not a mother figure? Well, first of all, because in Indo-European religion or paleo religion, there are two different and simultaneously nurturing elements. Okay, in the textbook I mentioned mother nature, father nurture, because the element of nature is more often than not in that type of linguistic and historical term associated with the divine mother, as opposed to the sky, which is associated with the divine father. Both need one another, these two poles. So this is something just to start. Now, so Deus related to Deus Pater as a divine figure. Dominus, Dominus, it's not just the divine figure, but it's also the owner or the head of the house, okay? In Latin, domus, okay? Domus, the house. Domus, okay? Think about terms such as domestic in English, or the dome, for instance, right? Domus is the house. So the dominus is the owner, the head of the house. Interestingly enough, that in certain Italic Romance languages, Italian is one of this, the term for woman is domina, okay, or goddess, head, right, divine female figure, which in modern Italian became donna, okay, okay. Now, terms such as prima donna is the exact opposite of what history and even common sense says. Prima donna is the divine figure, not the superficial, often portrayed as superficial, materialistic, fake presentation of the divine feminine. Is the head, the power head of the divine feminine. Okay, so when we think about hierarchy or domination, we should not think in modern politicized terms. Okay, something is true because it's true, not because it's viewed this way today, it was viewed that way yesterday, and will view in a third way tomorrow, or in more ancient past in a fourth or fifth or sixth way. Okay, so we had to relate to that. So in a course on consciousness, we have to keep in mind that our perception will also determine our reaction to the external world. So if this is a pyramid of evidence, okay, the pyramid of evidence in a scientific term, you'll see that the bottom of the pyramid is usually viewed as two things: the base and basis of the pyramid, the things upon which the pyramid rests. So it also represents some sort of foundation without which everything else will crumble, okay? So it's not unnecessary, it's not stupid, it's not gullible, it's not bad, okay? It's the foundation.
but the foundation itself is connected to the chthonic element, to the earthly element, to the basis. We use the term chthonic as well in Greek, okay? Chthonic. Okay. But you should aim for the top. The top of the pyramid is the one that has a higher position in the hierarchy. It cannot exist without a base, okay? But it does not mean that this relation between the top and the bottom is a relation of abuse. It's the opposite, okay? The bottom views at the top as aiming to further amelioration, embellishment, strive for truth, and the top is fully aware of the fact that it blossoms from the earth, just as much as, for instance, if this is the soil, okay, a beautiful rose can be born out of the soil, okay? So this is the aim, all right? It's the aim. And of course, whether we're using this in a figurative sense or simply speaking in a series of steps, okay? I mentioned that the top of the pyramid is the meta-analysis, right? Right below the top is this randomized control trial, the case control trial, right? It's clinical trial. And on the bottom pyramid, you have anecdotal evidence or observational studies, etc. The striving toward the top is what matters. Now, this is essential to understand consciousness, because in the brain, I mentioned this 1,000 times now, the central part of the brain is the one that determines biological life. If you think about biology, you think about these terms that will be recurrent in this course. I'm looking for a green marker. Terms such as bios or vis, right? Terms such as soma, terms such as physis, okay, etc., etc., okay? So soma as the body, somatic, for instance, right? Physis as nature, so something that becomes alive, is always born, reborn continuously, okay? And also related to the Greek term phos, okay, or light, okay? It's the bringer of light, okay? Nature is alive, bringer of light. And bios or vis as the force, the power, okay? The vital force. I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but this is connected to vis robris, which is the Latin for the concept of strength in the genitive case, but also the sacred oak, okay, the tree of knowledge. Now, there are multiple trees on academic level toward theology or exegetic interpretation of sacred text, for instance, okay? The tree of good and evil is not quite the same as the tree of knowledge, we'll see that, or it's not the same as in Nordic mythology, the Yggdrasil, okay, Yggdrasil. If you are familiar with that type of mythology, we'll circle back to that. But nevertheless, the concept remains, is the sacred oak, the tree of life that blossoms, okay? And so it's the vital force, which is connected to a vital force that's not quite understood yet, okay? And the term that I mentioned before was from vis to vir. Vir is Latin for man, this time as the male hero, but also the male power that's hard to determine, okay? The term in English, or archaic English, virvelf, okay, or werewolf, okay, werewolf, has the same root, okay? So it's this intense force that cannot be categorized, cannot be kept at bay. It needs to express itself just as much as the female force is Mother Earth. It's nature that comes out, that nurtures you, but can also destroy you. And therefore, you need to be fearful in the etymological sense, the same as fear of God. It's not you're afraid of existence, but you need to be in a position of reverence, of respect, and therefore you reestablish this hierarchy, this domination, dominus and domina, the connection between these two. So this is just to start. Now, I want to add something to it, which is connected to the symbolic features that can be added to the discussion. Now, disclaimer or disclosure, both. Some of these symbols are part of the conversation. What I'm not suggesting is that this is why certain ways of interpreting the world came to be, okay? Or the fact that from symbol A, there was an evolution to symbol B and symbol C. So there's some sort of symbolic re-representation of evolutionary biology. So there's a causal factor, no. Symbols cannot be interpreted in a linear manner, okay? More in a fractal way, more in a always re-representing form. So if I'm saying that this symbol is connected to this symbol, I'm not saying that this symbol derives from this symbol, okay? It's applying something to it. So this is how we will interpret the next phase. So let's start from this triangle, a single triangle. All right, so from this triangle, let's take a look at what else is there. So let me clean up a little bit, all right? And see if there are a few more things we can say. So let's start with symbols, all right? So there are symbols that they themselves speak without words. And you don't really need to go through, knowledge in esoteric mysticism or right versus left hand path to understand what I'm talking about. This triangle alone, okay, could mean something, okay? But if I'm adding an opposite and exactly equivalent triangle, immediately something else comes to mind, okay? The most basic thing will be, okay, a 6-pointed star, or it could be the Star of David, or Seal of Solomon, okay? Or the flag of Israel, or Jewish culture, and a variety of things, okay? Now, let's start from this. One way to interpret symbols is to interpret them in space. So our conscious awareness of symbols is also determined by our role in the world. If you remember what we said about the brain, and particularly about the parietal lobe and the somatosensory map, the somatosensory cortex and the motor cortex, this is connected to the way we perceive ourselves in space, okay? From a single dimension to a bidimensional representation level to a three-dimensional existence, okay? So example. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points of intersection in this figure, in these symbols, and then you have, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points of or tips of the pyramid, or arrows, you can view that as, or connecting elements between the intersecting lines, etc. So 6 and 6. Now those are all points in space, but we cannot unsee them. So if we have numbers, okay, already at this level we need to understand that the feature of counting numbers is both neurodevelopmentally as well as anthropologically relevant to consciousness. So if I'm doing this, okay, one single dot here, okay, now you'll see it, and so you know that this is a bidimensional dot created with a marker on a flat surface, right? But at the same time, a dot could exist here, or here, or here, or here, or here, like stars. And this dot could be a ball, okay, something that floats through space. It could be something that can be squished down like a circle. It can be a sphere. It doesn't have any specific dimension, okay? It exists in space. So it's the unicum, the unity, the one, okay? Unus. So this could be viewed as the divine being alone, okay? This holistic, omnicomprehensive being, okay? Holistic, holos, okay? Latin, omni, okay? So omni comprehensive, for instance, okay? That contains everything. All right. Holos, holistic, okay? Holistic, okay? Itself, of course, connected to our English whole, okay? as well as holy, all right, wholesome, etc. So there's an element of divine being that brings the right and left, the top and bottom, the black and white, all together, one dot, everything. Okay? Now, if we continue in our discussion, and from one dot, we say two dots, at this point, we need to have a choice. If the dot here is connected to another dot, at this point, I need to make a choice in space, a bidimensional space. The second dot can be here, can be here, can be here, here, etc. Okay? And you could say they're all equivalent in a sense that they represent circumference, right? A perimeter. But they're all in a bidimensional manner, okay? So two dots cannot be existing but in relation to one another. And that is good in a sense. It creates attention, creates conversation, creates communication, creates dialogue, as the name implies, dialogos. But it could also create extremes. Okay, so this is the diabolic feature that I was mentioning in lecture 1. Seeing reality as two separate things. Now, these two separate things in our archetypical ways can often be associated with the top and bottom, or with the male, female, with the light and darkness elements. So two elements in juxtaposition. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is that what is the thing that connects them? 1, 2, doesn't matter where you are. If you add a third, doesn't matter how far away the third is, it can be here, it can be here, okay? But in any case, it will be in a triangular shape, okay? So the interesting thing is that once you have two dots, okay, you have a third, at this point, you will have some sort of triangle in place. And not surprising in biblical terms or mathematical terms, think about the relevance of the number 3, it's manifested externally everywhere. So this in itself is the Trinitarian element. Okay, of course, Trinity in the Catholic and Orthodox Christian sense, to some extent even Lutheran Protestant sense, but the element of mother, father, and offspring, and the child, or male, female, and the divine being. Okay. Now, so if you have this element in itself that is pointed toward Earth or toward the sky, this is a real representation, not surprisingly, 6 inside and 6 outside, of the connection between these two beings. Okay. Now, again, we're using the term male and female in an archetypical sense here, the divine feminine, the divine masculine in this context. But I also want to be careful in this sense, because words carry a weight, but you need to strive for the true weight of the word, not the weight that's been associated to this or that political spectrum, or this or that, I cannot say it by using the term negative propaganda. The term propaganda itself has nothing negative in it. It's the gerund, present gerund of the Latin propagare, okay, propagare, which is really to propagate, to diffuse, to share. So propaganda is what is about to be propagated. So you have propagatus, okay, propagata, of course, propagante, okay, so that would be the present form, and then propagandus okay, so the word is propagated, but propagated as in shared, as in this wave-like effect, the core of which might or might not be true. All right, so every time we talk about this thing, we have to keep this in mind, so that we don't think of terms as derogatory terms of the truth. The same as dominus, the divine male figure, is the exact same hierarchical position as the domina, the divine female figure, okay, in two opposite areas of the triangle. The same thing for terms such as male and female. And I want to use this as an example. I mentioned this multiple times. So when we think about terms such as man and woman, okay, in hierarchical sense, so man and woman, okay, a very silly misconception is that the woman is just an added thing to the man, okay? While the truth is that both comes itself from the Germanic term bi, which is itself the woman, okay? So it's a magnified element, okay? Or the opposite, that that there is some sort of linguistic prevalence, as in higher appreciation for the male element in comparison to the female element. In terms of going from the grammar gender male to female, all the studies clearly indicate it has more to do with the selection process from the individual self as opposed to the group self, so that something that, for instance, have been plural was retranslated to the feminine or vice versa. I'll be happy to send a link below. Or the fact that certain things such as the archetypical FEM, okay, which is in the Sanskrit or the the Indo-European term, the indication of the feminine, okay, femme, female, etc., or the masculine MAC or MASC, masculinum, for instance. The first term is giving rise, at least in the West, to something that I would consider positive, but the second one is considered a negative thing, despite the fact that are just two opposites of the same thing. Now, what I'm not saying here is that they have to stick to that word, needs to change, but since we're talking about hierarchy predicated upon history, the fact that we nowadays want consciously or subconsciously to use terms in a different way from what they mean is something to be used in a very, very precise manner and with a higher, very high level of awareness and consciousness. Otherwise, we create a lot of damage. Okay? So going back to the Seal of Solomon, to the Star of David here, okay? Another added feature will be female and male aside here. Let's look at it as two opposites, okay? So from the number 3, okay, number 3, we can go to the number 4. At this point, the number 4 creates what? A stable feature, okay? Now, in the concepts of, I don't know, sacred geometry and alchemy, this esoteric knowledge, each number is associated to a geometric figure, okay? So let me put this all here in one line, perhaps, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., etc. I have room here. Each of the shape is a representation of symbolic feature. And so numbers are important because, first of all, we are using Arabic numbers, okay, or Arabo-Indian numbers, if you want to use a more inclusive Unani, Persian, Indo-European, Semitic perspective, okay? And it's one of the most fundamental ways to calculate things because, you know, the ancestor of the Greco-Roman world, especially the Roman world, they use number like this. Okay, they use number predicated upon their digits. Okay, so we count with our hands, right? I'm Italian, so I use the Romans as my ancestors. So 1 finger, 2 fingers, okay, 3 fingers, 4 fingers, 2 possibilities, depending which, if you go toward the early Middle Ages or the classic period, either 4 fingers or a hand, a V-shaped hand, 5, right, minus 1 finger, okay? Then 6, the opposite, you know, 1 V hand plus 1, 7, 8, 9, 2 hands, the X, right? Minus 1, and then 10, etc., etc., etc. And then, of course, you do have other system calculation because once the number is higher up, you have the Latin term for 100, centum, right? You have 50, you have 1,000, mille, etc., etc. Point I'm trying to make is that this is a connection between conceptual representation reality, what's observed, what is conscious, okay, our fingers, we count our fingers. And this is found throughout the ancient world. If you think about the Celtic background, if you think about French, for instance, and sure, French as a culture France as a nation, it's a mix of Roman and Celtic and Germanic, the Franks coming together. But in terms of the counting numbers, we have now the base is no longer 10, like our fingers, but base 20 because we use both our or their feet as well as their hands. But nevertheless, this is a symbolic representation of numbers in a sequence. The Arabic numbers, so the Indian numbers, are going much beyond that, and they create a sense of magnification by position. So everything is in a sequence, but only till 9, and then you just need to add zeros, if you remember what we said about the 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. So yet again, the number 1 is, according to this symbolic understanding, the male principle, because it represents the addendum, the creativity power, the active thing, okay? And the female is the one that gives power to magnify things, which symbolically speaking is exactly what happens in the Far East with the masculine principle as yang and the female principle as yin, okay? Day and night, okay? Because this one, the 0, is in itself attached to the 1 or to the 2 or 3, which themselves are all created based on units. So the 1 is the primary unit upon which every other unit is based. So whether it's 20 or 30, sorry, 230 or 10, we're talking about the same concept. But the 0, despite the fact that in itself does not contain numerical extended value representation, it's the one that creates space, that creates life. That's exactly why you have the female principle attached to it. Is the sacred athanor, is the sacred cauldron that creates life, okay? Which cannot be created by the male counterpart. It relies on the female counterpart to create life. Biologically speaking, exactly the same thing. So you might wonder, okay, you're going from the Middle East, the Semitic culture from Palestine, Israel, Syria, etc., to the Greco-Roman world, to the Indian world, and to China and Japan, to the Taoistic world. So how is this connection represented in other cultures? This will be one of the questions that we can ask. Again, at this level, we're just doing analogies here. I don't want you to necessarily assume that this is derives from this one, this derived from that one. We find commonalities, all right? But one thing that you notice is, for instance, that the proximity, cultural, ethno-cultural, historical proximity of the Middle East to the Greco-Roman world, after all, we all talk about the Mediterranean area, and its proximity is much closer than political divisions want us to believe for the last 1,000 years or so, much more similar. This is found in, again, the connection between one principle, and let's consider this the female principle, because that's usually how it's interpreted in archetypical sense. Okay, this is also the feminine creative power, the sacred feminine embodied, so to speak. Okay, also anatomically speaking, as opposed to the upwards, which is the masculine. Okay. And the intersection of them creates the, so to speak, the complete divine element. I no longer have the blue. I don't have the blue. Oh well, we'll do it in black. The complex divine being together would be this shape, okay? But intersections here. So this one contains the yin and yang. But if you go into the Taoist interpretation, you also have a yin and yang, right? But this time the containment is a drop, so you no longer have this very angle-like, edgy intersections, okay? But you have something that's more malleable, more fluid, so to speak, okay? Now, some anthropologists also argue that this is predicated upon the archetypical ways that certain cultures interpret the world. Certain cultures are more archetypical, logical structure, edge-like, mathematical, symbolic in terms of geometry, and some cultures are more like wave-like, like rivers, like spectrum, like rainbow, like water, like waves, etc. The point is that you do have both elements in these two representation, etc., etc. So This is one way to look at the concept of hierarchy, okay? The juxtaposition, the dialogue, the love, the aiming for a higher level, okay? I'm only using these two examples here, but we will encounter a lot of symbolic features throughout this semester. But this all started from the pyramid of evidence. So the fact that the two poles need one another to blossom. Now, there's a lot of things that we could add to this. And in neurotonical terms, this is also connected to the way we perceive ourselves in the world. It's connected to, yet again, the parietal lobe, the somatosensory cortex, and the way we make sense of the world. And this is especially true in the context of the homunculus and, yet again, the somatosensory map. Our consciousness of events have to do with the way we manifest events outwardly, or the opposite, the way these events manifest themselves toward us inwardly. So we recreate the world outside based on the way the world outside speaks to us. We are part of the world, okay? So it's a manifestation. So let's see if we can interpret this term, manifestation. Manifestation, okay? So first thing first, okay? It's something active. There's something happening here, and that's Asian. Every word in English that ends with Asian is connected with actio or action, okay, which is from agire or agire, okay, the same root as agenda, okay. Something that happens, an action, a movement, okay. And then the other two terms. One is man, which is not the Germanic term, okay? It's not as the Germanic term, so no Germanic root here, okay? No Germanic root, but it's connected to manus, okay? Female manus, which is Latin for hand, okay? Think about amanuensis or manual, for instance, done with the hand, okay? And then festis, this is a little more complicated to demonstrate in historical terms, possibly to squeeze, to fasten, to push, to demonstrate even, okay? So something that is shown with the hand, something created with the hand. So it's manifested outwardly, created from, I would say ex nihilo, from nothingness, but represented. In Greek, usually this is connected to the epiphany, okay? Manifestation as in epiphany, okay? Which is very often used in theological terms, especially in Orthodox or Catholic terms. So the epiphany, the manifestation of the divine. This is to say that the world becomes the world as it appears to us. Now, careful what I'm saying here is that I'm not suggesting what the postmodernists would say as everything in the world, it's just our creation. The world does not exist in itself. It's all a question of the way you see the world, the way you create it. There's no reality outside the way we create it. No, I completely disagree with that. And throughout this course, hopefully, I will be able to make several cases as to why that is nonsense, okay? But it's manifestation as creativity itself. So, a few more things before I let you go. So the way the world appears, okay, appears to us, okay, it's also the way the world shines to us, okay? In German, scheinen, again, it's both to appear, to demonstrate, to shed light, and to shine, okay? So you add light, not because you're creating something that was not there before, but because the inner light will allow you to see the thing for its own truth, okay? So you're not creating a reality from scratch. You're able to remove all the layers that were creating a fake images of the truth, and you shine on it. Your light shines. okay, shine and you shed light. So that is how the world appears to us. So the more connected to the truth we are, the more the world appears in its own truth, beauty, and goodness, as we mentioned last week. And this is connected to consciousness because there is a poetic element in understanding the world. If you are half conscious in a comatose state, the world will not appear to you the way it is. Now, I'm not suggesting that certain terms within paranormal, out of body, near-death experiences are not truth. In fact, one could argue that that is a higher, more profound truth than what you perceive in this world, okay? But you should not look at these terms in juxtaposition. There will be this diabolic feature, juxtaposing as opposed, but removing these layers to find the truth. After all, yet again, that is the meaning of scientific discovery, right? To discover is really to uncover. And you uncover something that was there. You did not create it from scratch, okay? At the same time, it's connected to this poetic, I mentioned this term, level, because in psychology of consciousness, you need this poetic notion. And poetic, in the Greek sense, means creative in all possible ways. Okay, not just creative in an artistic sense, but creative in terms of reassembling things to create something new. So yet again, you uncover the truth, but you put all the pieces together. A good analogy would be Lego blocks. You did not create the Lego blocks per se, but you can reassemble and create your own narrative, your own poetry. That's how to go about life. Our consciousness is entirely attached to the world because we are part of the world, but the world speaks to us, or even better, since we talk about poetry, the world sings and dances to us, and we can sing and dance back. We are part of this divine dance, and this is a figure, a symbol that you can find throughout the ancient world. You can certainly find in Indo-European cultures, pagan culture, and you can find, for instance, in the Psalms and in David with the harp, for instance, right, in biblical knowledge. Pagan, by the way, is something that I will mention a few times here. I just want to spend a few seconds on the term. The term pagan itself is it's really one of the terms that we need to define. So pagan comes from the pagus, okay? So in modern times, okay, and by modern, I mean really in the last 1500 years, it derives from the town, okay? The town. So it's only relatively recent that we juxtapose pagan religion, pagan philosophy, pagan culture, as opposed to monotheistic culture, so to Islam, sorry, to Judaism, Christianity, Islam in a historical order, okay? The people from the town folk, so in a derogatory sense, sure, that has been used by some monotheistic, I would say, philosopher or theologians in a negative sense, same as the way we could consider someone rural or redneck in a derogatory term, okay? Rural, by the way, rural is from the Rus, okay? Latin, okay? Not the Rus in the Cyrillic sense, not this Rus, okay? Not this one. So connected to the Chthonian and to the Mother Earth, and we will see that we are perceiving two opposite worldview that come together. So that the pagans were the town folk, they were connected to the sacred earth and the forest, and because of the Roman Empire influence toward the continent, the Romans ceased to be pagan in a rural sense, okay, despite the fact that their mythology was still very much connected to Dionysiac elements, but became more civilized. And this is not a question of judgment, civilized from the civitas, okay? Civitas, or city, okay? They were dwelling in cities as opposed to the townfolk that dwell in more rural or forest life. By the way, certain terms are still used in English to this day. If you think about forestry, okay, in the term foreigner, okay, foreigner or forest, okay, etc. They all come from the forest, as the people we don't know come across the woods from the opposite side of the woods. Okay, bit or wood in Germanic terms. Okay, so it's important to distinguish terms, and when we think about the juxtaposition between the city and the forest, we'll talk about this a lot, is the same juxtaposition, the same dialogue you can find between, yet again, the inner core of the brain and the outer core of the brain. So the limbic system on one side, midbrain, and the cortical elements, but also between myself and the world around me. So I create a city for myself. In biblical terms, this is connected to the fall, okay? To the fall, the hierarchical, the archetypical fall, okay? Which again, you find in the biblical narrative, but of course, to this is connected all the narrative of the fall, but also the flood. So the fall from the top of the mountain, from the hierarchy, where the primeval Adam fell from, okay? And as Adam was falling, more and more layers, okay, were surrounding him, and that's connected to the legend of giants that became these bigger entities, okay, with more and more layers, because they fall away from the divine sparkle and became bigger and bigger in order to protect themselves from all the debris that they were encountering falling down. Okay, so in this sense, you understand the dual nature of reality. The consciousness that falls down from the higher level of the hierarchy, the immediate connection with the divine, with the totality of it, and falling down by virtue of becoming big. And the symbol of these layers around us to protect us, the armor, became the walls around the city, okay? So the city and the rus, okay? Civitas and rus, rural as opposed to citizen, okay? Or civilized. So there's two opposites. And so everything we're discussing here in terms of consciousness is bridging the gap between these two poles, okay? From the micro to the macro, from the outer layer to the inner core, okay? Now, in a poetic sense, and that's where I conclude, there is indeed a longing, okay? Because there is an element of detachment, progressive detachment, whether you can look at that as detaching myself as an individual from my culture, my family, my background, or detaching myself as a child from the womb, the body of my mother. I'm detaching myself, or I'm detaching myself from a country that had to lead due to war, and I'm a refugee, or I have to detach myself from the school because I graduated. There is an element of nostalgic longing, and that's how I finish. The very term nostalgia used to be a diagnosis. Nostalgia, okay? In Latin or Italian, nostalgia. And I would like to leave you with this. Nostalgia is the illness, the aching toward what is ours, what feels familiar, what is our town, the pagus, the origin, the core, okay? Algia, okay, as you can find in many other medical descriptions. Think of fibromyalgia, for instance, okay? Fibromyalgia, so this aching, this pain, okay? Okay, and nost, okay, which is connected to the Latin, okay, nos, etc. Okay, in runic term nos, etc. All this us, okay. In fact, this is also connecting to not the nous in Greek, but to the us in the plural form. So the aching, the longing for what we used to be, the longing for this source, this divine source, this divine nature, this transcendental consciousness. And this is to some extent our duty, our purpose, and our meaning, our direction, going back to the source, going back to what gave us birth, the divine entity, so to speak, where you have this complement between the divine top, the sky, and the divine bottom, the earth that gives rise, that gives birth to life. So this is where I'd like to end our conversation today. A lot to cover. I will add a few more of the scriptures below because there are other things that I did not have the chance to discuss in relation to more neuroanatomical, neurofunctional elements that hopefully you will be able to review. But thank you very much for paying attention. I'm always here for you if you have any questions or comments. But otherwise, I will see you all next week.